Hi, I'm Megan Kelzer, and I will be talking about Kamiak Butte. Some things we'll be going over is the geology, climate, biome, field trip, and prescribed fires and mixed forests. Kamiak Butte is located in Washington state between Pullman and the Palouse. This unique geological feature was created in a very distinct way and thrives in its location. 50 million years ago, the area neighboring Kamiak Butte was located in the coast of North America. Geologic features advanced and evolved because of plate tectonics. The continents were once all pushed together and fit like a puzzle piece, which is called Pangea or the supercontinent. Plate tectonics moved these continents around, which is known as the supercontinent cycle. Pullman and Spokane were once oceanfront property around 50 million years ago because of this supercontinent cycle. This supercontinent formed the Rocky Mountains when they were once volcanoes, which helped the form of Kamiak Butte. This oceanic property was covered by sand. However, with time and pressure, the sand deposited on the seafloor formed quartzite rock. Quartzite rock resists pressure, creating them as prominent features. Later, a giant volcanic eruption occurred throughout Idaho and eastern Washington. This land, including the Columbia River and Astoria to the Pacific Ocean, was flooded with basalt lava. This was called the flood basalts. However, the resistant quartzite rock was so tall that the flood basalts did not cover it. After the basaltic flows, loess soil blew from the west and was deposited west of Kamiak Butte. These soils can get to be 250 feet, however, they can thin to less than 100 feet in the northeast. These depositions today are known as the rolling hills of the Palouse. The picture inserted in this slide is an example of the rolling hills of the Palouse. Overall, Kamiak Butte and its surrounding areas was formed so uniquely. It is different from its surrounding hills because of its ancient quartzite rock that has remained there for millions of years. It is formed so uniquely, however, it thrives in supporting its vegetation and productive soils. The average elevation of Kamiak Butte is 2,542 feet, which is around 1,041 feet higher than Pullman, Washington, the nearest town to Kamiak Butte. On one side of the mountain, there is a difference of vegetation, sunlight, and weather, which creates a unique difference in climate. On the southern hemisphere of the mountain, there is more vegetation, such as a variety of trees and deeper soil. The soil is cooler and can hold a greater water storage capacity. On the northern side of the mountain, there is shallow soil and less vegetation. This means the soil is warmer and has a greater variation in temperature. The lack of vegetation creates more sunlight on the northern side of the mountain. The PAR, also known as photosynthetic active radiation, is active on the northern side of the mountain. Since the microclimate differs so much, so does the organisms. In the pictures provided, the larger picture on the left is an example of the south aspect of Kamiak Butte, and the smaller picture on the right is an example of the north aspect of Kamiak Butte. As you can tell between the two pictures, one aspect has more vegetation and understory and overstory species. The difference of vegetation along with other factors creates a difference of macroclimate. Macroclimate is described as a broad-scale climate of a large region within a continent, which is affected by a variety of functions, and one of them is being topography. Topography is the arrangement or layout of land surfaces. Topography affects the overall climate of an area, and it can block wind patterns, which creates rain-shadow effects. Topography creates the rain-shadow effect, which is why Kamiak Butte is drier on the western side of Washington. Kamiak Butte is a North American interior shrublands and woodlands biome. This biome once had green vegetation and went throughout the hills with an overstory shrub layer and an understory grass layer. However, this is now covered with agriculture. The Palouse Prairie is the most important lentil growing region in the United States, which means that a little percent of the original region exists and it is very endangered. Along with being the most endangered ecosystem in the United States, the Palouse Prairie also has an extensive amount of invasive species. North African grass is an invasive species and can be prominent on the butte as well as cheatgrass. Invasive species is also known as an anthropogenic influence, which means it originates from human activity. Other anthropogenic influence include domestic livestock grazing, wildfires, and agriculture conversion. These are all popular among the shrublands and woodlands biome. When we went on the Kamiak Butte field trip in September, my group and I noticed the differences of the north and south aspect on Kamiak Butte. The northeast aspect is partially protected from the sun because the trees are dense, creating a tree canopy. This in turn means the species that live in this area needs more shade compared to the south aspect. The south aspect is fully exposed as the species requires more sunlight if they are growing and interacting in the specific aspect. The landscape in Kamiak Butte differs depending on what aspect you go to. Therefore, organisms interact with their physical environment differently. The northeast aspect has more vegetation and species, as the south aspect has less vegetation and more sun exposure. The northeast aspect has a higher tree canopy coverage because there is an excess of vegetation. My group and I took several overstory canopy coverage measurements, and around 60% or higher was recorded in the northeast aspect of the mountain. The south aspect of the mountain had a much lower canopy coverage because there was a lack of trees and vegetation. The vegetation between the two aspects differ as my group and I observed both plots. On one plot on the north side, my group and I recorded 5 Douglas firs, 3 ponderosa pines, and 3 western larches. On the south aspect, grass covered around 90%, snowberry covered around 70%, and wild rose covered 80% of our plot. This information is recorded on the table provided. This table contains information about the south aspect of Kamiak Butte. It contains information about the overstory species and the understory species. Wildfires are a natural occurrence that happen in an ecosystem. They occur from various natural factors, such as lightning or periods of drought. However, without these natural occurrences, ecosystems would be largely at risk. With the act of suppressing wildfires, Kamiak Butte and other important forests will have an increase of dangerous, high-intensity wildfires. Kamiak Butte has a mixed coniferous forest on the north side. Some of these trees include ponderosa pine, western larch, and Douglas fir. On the south side of Kamiak Butte, there is no variation of trees. However, the most prominent tree is ponderosa pine. Historically, ponderosa pine naturally burns on a cycle from every 5 to 25 years. This natural, frequent burn was beneficial because it burned the understory species such as grasses and shrubs. The fire burned old decayed matter that could potentially turn into dangerous fuels. 10 acres of Kamiak Butte was burned because of an illegal campfire. The fire started burning through the understory species and burned its way through the dense vegetation. Although much of the shrub species and grass species was burned, the ponderosa pine recovered because it is durable and it can withstand fire. Their protective, thick bark, deep roots, and lower limbs are factors that increase the ponderosa pine's ability to withstand fire. The ponderosa pine is crucial to Kamiak Butte because it is one of the most vital trees on both aspects of the mountain. The image provided on the left is an example of ponderosa pine's protective thick bark. Treatments to restore forests are vital and beneficial. The treatment on restoring forests is widely controversial and can harm other important species such as lichen. Lichen is not the only important species getting burned. However, without ponderosa pine, Kamiak Butte will be affected immensely as their important understories will not flourish along with the other species that is connected to the mixed forest. To keep Kamiak Butte and its species healthy, it is important to practice prescribed wildfires and thinning trees. Without these mechanisms, its ancient geology and unique aspects will become extinct.